My brother's famous bottom goes camping. Chapter 11, Startling Events. It was such a muddled afternoon yesterday that we forgot to have any supper. We didn't get home from the campsite until the evening, and then we had to unload the car, settle the hens back in the coop, milk rubbish and water the vegetable patch. I don't think I'll be a farmer when I grow up. There's too much looking after to do. I mean, you even have to look after cabbages and lettuces and stuff. I was so tired by the time all that had been done, I went straight to bed. It was only when I woke in the middle of the night that I realised how hungry I was. I tried to get back to sleep, but my tummy felt as if several mice were nibbling away inside it. My bedside clock said 2:15. It was hours before breakfast. I'd die of starvation before then. The only thing to do was to get up and creep downstairs, trying not to wake anyone, and find something to eat. If you've ever gone on a food hunt in the middle of the night, you'll know what it's like. There are all those floorboards and stairs that squeak and creak. The noise sounded like thunder to me, but everyone slept on. Dad was snoring quietly. At least, I think it was Dad. I suppose it might just as easily have been Mum. I got to the kitchen safely and hunted around for some food. I decided to have a whopping bowl of cereal because it was easy to sort out. I fetched a bowl, filled it up and got some milk from the fridge. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and began to chomp my way through it all. Wow, there's nothing like a midnight feast. Magic. Outside, the hens started clucking, which was odd because it was still dark. I know Captain Birdseye likes to crow early in the morning, but 2:30 is way too soon for him. I was sort of eating and looking out of the kitchen window at the same time, and that was when I saw the figure in our garden, down near the hen house. Whoa! I was so shocked I dropped my spoon. It fell into my bowl, making the biggest splosh ever. My hands automatically shot out to try and catch it, and I managed to catapult it right out of the bowl instead, flicking milk in my face and all down my pyjamas. Nice one, Nicholas. Why don't you drown yourself in milk? The spoon fell to the floor and clattered onto the tiles. Whoever it was in the garden turned and looked towards the house as if they'd heard something. I ducked down and stayed there a few seconds. Then I crept closer to the window to get a better look. I was beginning to wonder if it was Mr. Tug out there creeping about, but if it was, what was he up to? When I saw the figure climb over our fence and into next door's garden, I was sure it was Mr. Tug. He was obviously heading home. Mind you, he seemed to be having a lot of difficulty getting into his house and was struggling with the back door. Eventually he gave up and decided to try a window instead. A window? It wasn't Mr. Tug at all. It was a thief. I was about to rush upstairs to wake Dad when the burglar alarm went off. At least, what actually happened was that the chickens went off. They were the alarm. They suddenly went berserk, led by their choirmaster, Captain Birdseye. You should have heard the shrieks. A moment later, Mr. Tug's searchlights fizzed on and the gardens were flooded with light. The burglar froze in panic, staring all around, and then decided to make a run for it in our direction. With one bound, he cleared the fence and began to sprint across our vegetable patch before he skidded to a halt and stared in horror at the creature in front of him. It was the fox. The fox had returned for the hens, and now the burglar had caught the fox red-handed, and the fox had caught the burglar red-handed, and the pair of them stood and stared at each other, with the fox snarling and spitting furiously, showing all his very sharp teeth. The burglar decided to beat a hasty retreat. He charged back towards Mr. Tug's garden, leaping our fence for the third time, and landed, splash, in the middle of the Tug's pond. He crawled out only to find Mr. Tug standing over him, blowing his whistle and waving his neighbourhood watch badge at him. Seconds later, my mum and Dad appeared in the garden, wondering what was going on, and then Mrs. Tugg came hurrying out from next door. She threw her arms round her husband and said that she had never seen such bravery. Mr. Tugg went red with embarrassment. "What happened?" asked my dad, still half asleep. Mr. Tugg smiled. Whoopee! It felt like Christmas. Mr. Tugg actually looks quite cuddly when he smiles. "Just for once you haven't been the cause of all this mayhem," he said with some satisfaction. "I have just caught a burglar. The police are already on their way. It's quite safe now," he went on airily. "You can go back to your beds and sleep soundly. Everything's under control." Mr. Tugg drew himself up to his full height and gave a self-satisfied nod. "All under control." Dad shook his head and turned to go back indoors. "That's fine then. Good night, officer." "Good night," nodded Mr. Tugg. We got back inside and I had to tell Mum and Dad every detail of what had happened. My parents had big bowls of cereal while I told them this because by this time they were hungry too. And I had another bowl because, if you remember, most of my first bowl was sprinkled across the kitchen floor. We went back to bed and I slept in until 10 o'clock in the morning. Brilliant. We had to get Granny and Lancelot round so we could tell them in the morning. We were halfway through all that when the doorbell rang. It was the inspector from the council. She'd come to inspect our garden and we'd clean forgotten all about it because of last night. "There have been several complaints from your neighbour, Mr. Tugg," said Miss Rice with a sniff. "What a surprise," muttered Dad. "I understand you keep hens here and a goat and a tortoise?" "That's right." "I'd like to see them, please." Tomato suddenly burst into the room, waving a rather mangled carrot. "Cecily Sprout fell down the stairs and she's broken her leg," she cried. "Oh dear, that is sad," murmured Mum soothingly. "Look," said my sister, holding up her doll. One of the carrot's 2 pointy legs had snapped right off. Her green hair had gone rather limp and brown too. "A carrot has a broken leg?" Miss Rice gave my father such a look of alarm that he quickly steered her outside and showed her the garden. "It's quite a little farm you have here," Miss Rice said with surprise. "Now tell me, how loud are your animals?" Dad shrugged. "The hens cluck, Captain Birdseye crows, Rubbish bleats, and the tortoise keeps himself to himself." "Yes, but how loud are they? Can you make them squeak for me?" "Not really, no," answered Dad. "It's not the sort of thing you do with farm animals. Make them squeak. Normally you just feed them, milk them, or collect eggs." Miss Rice shook her head. "That's not good enough. I need to hear how loudly they squeak. Can't you poke them?" "Poke them?" echoed Dad. "Are you mad?" Oh dear, I could see which way things were going, and I desperately hoped Dad would keep his cool. It wasn't going to happen, of course. "No, I'm not mad at all. I need to hear your animals being noisy. That's my job. If you won't poke them, I will. Give me that stick." "No, I shan't," said Dad. "Nobody's allowed to poke my animals, not even me. How would you like it if I poked you?" Dad grabbed the stick. Oh no. I shut my eyes. I knew what was going to happen next. "Just a moment," a voice bellowed. I opened my eyes again. It was Mr. Tugg. He called over the fence, "Miss Rice, how lovely to see you. Before you go any further, I wonder if I might have a word. I'm the one who's complained about these animals. Now, as captain of the local neighbourhood watch, some recent developments have come to my attention." "Oh, you'd like to add to your complaints, would you?" asked Miss Rice, getting out her notebook. "No, not exactly." Mr. Tugg began to scratch his head, as if he had taken himself by surprise. "In fact, I would like to withdraw all my complaints." "All of them?" chorused Miss Rice and Dad, for quite different reasons. "Yes, last night I caught a burglar, and it was entirely because of these hens. If they hadn't made such a fuss, I wouldn't have woken up. You see, the hens acted as a burglar alarm. Without them, the thief would have broken into our homes. I'm very grateful to them." "Really?" chorused Dad and Miss Rice for quite different reasons again. "Oh yes, so please drop the matter," smiled Mr. Tugg. "In fact, I'd like to make the hens my official night watch men, or rather night watch hens." And that was that. Miss Rice has gone, and we can keep Rubbish and Schumacher and, of course, Captain Birdseye, Mavis Moppet, Beaky, Leaky and Poop. It's brilliant. And the biggest surprise of all came when Mum went to the hen house a bit later. "The hens have laid," she yelled back to the house. "They've all laid eggs, every one of them." So that made it double brilliant. And guess what? We're going camping again in a couple of weeks. Dad says we'll go to a different campsite and we're not going to take any animals. Tomato seems to have forgotten all about Cecily Sprout. She's now waiting excitedly for the eggs to hatch. She seems to think that they're going to produce kittens. "Because that's what I want," she told me. 4 kittens, a tabby, a ginger one, a white one and a pink one. "Pink," I repeated. "Yes, and I'm going to call it Pink Poop because I like pink and I like poop." I guess that once you've lived with a carrot called Cecily Sprout, Pink Poop seems like a pretty good name. And that is the end of the story. I hope you've enjoyed it.